Hello and welcome to the Daily News. Today we're going to be discussing some things people have been asking me about. One of them being the Los Angeles Times interview with the Duffer brothers, and the other being the thing that disturbed my bedtime yesterday, which was this claim that because of Netflix, the Duffers had to delete a lot of footage material in the editing room, which would explain the holes, the amount of inconsistency within Volume 2, and why it feels so empty and unrelated to the first one. So I will be addressing these things. I will start addressing the Duffers interview first. I'll be leaving the prints here. To make Will unstoppable, Stranger Things creators had him face a fear bigger than Vecna. What could be more gulp-inducing than trying to defeat a nightmarish vine-covered villain and wipe out an eerie and horror-filled alternate dimension? Maybe writing a satisfying conclusion to a mega-popular TV show built on that idea. Ross and Matt Duffer, the sibling masterminds behind Netflix Stranger Things, are closer to finding out if they've achieved that in the eyes of the show's fans. On this morning in early December, the duo are in their own alternate dimension limbo, with the show's final season release, Volume 1, is out and they're bracing for impact with Volume 2. The day that Volume 1 was released, I paced around all day. I did absolutely nothing, just waiting for reactions to come in and reviews to come in, because you really never know how people are going to react. There's pros and cons to the show growing in size and the way it did. People just take it apart to an insane degree. It's scary, always scary. You never really get used to it. But the self-doubt keeps them sharp, he says. It forces you not to get lazy. It's a balance between feeling very confident, then it swings to being very insecure about it, and it's hard to keep sight. Ross adds, you watch these episodes dozens and dozens of times over and over again, and the strange thing about this show is that a very small group of people had seen the episodes. A really small circle. Then suddenly, you're just blasting it out to millions of people all at the same time. The pair are sitting on a couch in the office they share. E.T., Alien, and Batman Returns posters adorn the walls and their facilities. Upside Down Productions in Los Angeles why they were able to revel in fan reaction for a few days after the release of Volume 1. They're back in work mode. At this point, they still have to finalize sound and color, as well as some visual effects on the series finale. Very boring visual effects, Matt quips. If I have to look at one more shot of spores and fog, I'm going to lose my mind. For now, the drip-drop release around the year and holidays continues, with Volume 2, episodes 5 through 7 now streaming. The episodes contain some of the season's bigger emotional beats, including one of TV's most amicable breakups between teenagers, a mended friendship, and a character finally living his true self openly. The Duffers discussed that and more in this edited conversation. Okay, so from now forward, I will only be addressing the questions in this interview that interest me. So I'll be leaving them here. Let's start with those final 10 minutes of episode 7. Will, Noah Schnapp, shares a part of himself that he's kept secret for a long time. He realizes that if he wants to be successful in defeating Vecna, he can't feel afraid about his part of myself. Misspelling, I think. How did you decide Will's coming out would be revealed? It's something that we've been planning to do for a really long time. Initially, it was planned for season 4, and we just felt it was unearned by the end of it. And this explains a lot, because when I was watching season 4, it actually felt like they were going to close Will's arc just there. The fact that they weren't closing it and they were dragging it onto the finale made me really believe that there was a reason for that it was probably going to be like rewarding. And I assumed that it was because he could probably be reciprocated. So they're addressing this now. I know there was kind of no possible way that they could just tell this to the audience earlier because it would be sort of a spoiler, but watching season 4, it's really weird. Like watching Will's arc in season 4, I really thought that they were going to close it right there. I thought by the end of the season he's going to get rejected and that's how it ends. But not only do they not close Will's arc, he doesn't get rejected directly. Maleven is left very open. I don't know if you remember the end of season 4, but it's really open. Ella's not talking to Mike. So all of that leads us to believe that the reason why they chose to drag it on to season 5, it's because it's going to have some type of reward. Now, I don't think a lot of people remember that Mike and Eleven weren't really talking at the end of season 4 and that the confession that Mike gave didn't really work. So them being fixed at the beginning of season 1 is just something that also needs an explanation, just in order for the show to be cohesive. We wrote that scene with him in the back of the van and him talking to Jonathan, Charlie Heaton, but I like the idea of Will slowly building to this moment. He has a breakthrough in episode 4 in a major way, but he has this one final step to take in order to really unlock his full potential. Something we really wanted to do with the show is tie his emotional growth with these powers that he's developed. Putting it at the penultimate episode ultimately made sense because what we're trying to do with the second volume is get our characters in a place where they all felt confident in themselves. Will being one of the major character arcs that carries through the season, but also with Dustin, Gaten Matarazzo, and Steve, Joe Keery, and Nancy, Natalia Dyer, and Jonathan, we wanted to get people before they go into this final battle having dealt with their internal fears and doubts. Because that's what Vecna weaponizes against you. If you don't have that self-hatred or self-doubt or those insecurities, then he can't hurt you. When Will purges himself of that, he becomes unstoppable, or that's the hope. My question for the Duffers is just simply, why do all the queer characters are the only ones who have to go through this journey? Why is there always this idea of queer characters, queer people in general, being linked to a lack of self-identity early on in life? Because from what I've seen from your show, in season 4, you have a character that is far more off than Will, and it's Mike. And that is very clearly shown to us by you, because this character, when he goes over to Lenore in California, he's not dressed like himself. He's completely performative. He's trying to appeal to what he thinks his girlfriend will like. He tries to hold on to this relationship like so desperately that it can't run away from him because otherwise he will be miserable. He has such a lack of individuality and self-confidence in himself that if someone ever needs to learn to resolve their internal struggles, it should be Mike Wheeler. It shouldn't be Will Byers. In fact, I think besides all of his emotional turmoil in season 4, during all their journeys to find Elle with the van at Susie's house, Jonathan is so stoned and Argyle, it's in the same state that if you pay attention, Will a lot of the times is the person that has to sort of mentor the group. He has to ask the questions and propose solutions. He's actively engaging in the group in season 4. He seems quite confident if you look at it from that perspective. He's not doing great, but he is not doing as bad as Elle. Elle is having such a hard time and he's there for her. He's been so given. And not to say that if you're giving, it means you're resolved with yourself. But to me, Will didn't feel as lost as he was suddenly out of nowhere in season 5 after he thinks that Mike doesn't reciprocate. And so if Vecna targets these people, why only the queer characters? Why can't we have an arc of self-acceptance and self-identity that revolves around other characters that need to be more explored, aka Mike Wheeler? And also, how do you explain the fact that Mike Wheeler at the beginning of season 5 is completely back to normal? And in my opinion, I mean, if you're watching this show, you could argue it was because of the painting speech, and he just really thought that that's what made him go back to his leadership position again, because Mike relies on validation. He needs someone to look at him and to tell him, hey, you are needed. People need you. You are valuable to the group. You are valuable to your relationships. And when Will does that, he suddenly has this character transformation, which is really just him going back to his roots. But if it's not explained in the psychology of all the scene and how it develops in a way that makes Mike again, then I don't know how they explain that. The only way that they are explaining this is because they wanted to go back to the themes of season 1, and that's why Mike changed. It has nothing to do with his interaction in previous seasons. That's really inconsistent to me. What did you want that moment to be? What didn't you want it to be? We were nervous about it because you want to get it right, particularly working with Noah, who had recently come out himself. When he read it and we got his blessing, we felt really, really good about it. For us, it clicked writing it when we started talking about what are Will's actual fears here in the future. When the show really works for us is when we can combine both our mythology and the supernatural with the emotional. In this case, it's going. Vecna is taking these fears and weaponizing them against Will, so Will actually talking to the group about these fears as opposed to keeping them to himself. That's when the scene really clicked. The original plan was for him to come out to Joyce, Winona Ryder, and we started writing it, and it felt really wrong because if he's really going to be confronting these fears, he has to open up to his friends as well. Once we did that and we put the group in there and we had him talk about what he saw in the future, in his future, that's when the scene felt as coming out, like something very unique to this show. First of all, I want to say that the first time that I figured out that Noah agreed to all of this, I was a bit surprised. And recently, in clips of interviews that have been rising on social media, I've been realizing that he wasn't so sure of the scene either, and I think he felt probably very uncomfortable, but he wasn't comfortable telling the Duffers that he wasn't comfortable. This is such a big thing, and you can't really predict the audience's reaction. I think in Noah's mind, he was really making justice to something, but it felt weird because it is a weird scene. And as I mentioned in my previous videos, it should have never been a coming out to everyone else. And I bring a really important point again to this discussion, which is the first thing people get to know about you should never be your sexual identity. It shouldn't be that big of a deal, and it shouldn't have been portrayed that way because there are characters in that room like Kali, Murray, they barely know Will. The first thing they get to know is the super vulnerable and open conversation. I understand if you wanted to open up to Joyce or Jonathan. I think they should have left it at that. I could argue in a lot of other scenes that the Duffers' intentions aren't as pure as they seem to be, but in relation to this case, I really think that they were trying to do a good job. They just were ignorant on this matter. And that's not to say, like, that's not an insulting. It's just, I'm really convinced that they were ignorant. They did not know that it was going to have this response. They really thought that they were doing the right thing. In their minds, that was the right thing to do, and it felt right to this generation, and they probably think that the generation is very woke and it would be something that we would like to see on television, which isn't and wasn't, but that's maybe not what they intended for. I can respect the fact that they were trying to do a good job and it didn't come out the way that they wanted to. I just feel overall sorry for Noah that he had to sit there, and he said that it felt like a performance, like he was performing to an audience or having like a conference. I also don't think you should take advantage of your actors' vulnerabilities to bring out like, of course this has many nuances, and I think if I want to talk about this, I would have to talk about my opinion on method acting. And I'm not against method acting. I just think they do this with every single character. They said that they were bringing out traits about the actors for the performances, and I think they did it a little too far with this one because it's a very sensitive matter, and it would have felt so much more intimate if you made Noah interpret Will coming out to Joyce or to Jonathan. It making him say that to every single person that is in the cast almost. It feels like we're watching Noah Schnapp instead of Will Byers. It's not just unfair to the character, I think it's also unfair to the actor. But again, I don't think this was made with malicious intent. I'm just sad that it turned out to be approved and not reviewed before they actually decided the scene was going to be done that way. It's the scene we spent the longest on this season because we were so anxious about it and getting it right. It was the most important scene of the season. I can't emphasize enough how much the actors influence the characters and their journeys, as people really feed into what we're writing and how we write those characters. You're trying to channel Noah and what he went through and his growth, which we've watched as a person, and he's found himself. Most of what is in the show is the first take. The first close-up that we did of Noah. It was incredible to watch because it's one of those moments where Noah was not acting. And this is completely correct. You can look at that scene and you see such realness in Noah's performance that it saved the scene in a way. When I watched it, I felt these conflicting feelings. I was so upset that they were going to do it that way. Not upset, that was, I think, post-realization. But at the time, I just felt weirded out. And then another part of me was so sensitized because the performance was really that good. The acting didn't feel like acting at all. It was one of the times where Noah Schnapp did a really good job, and I think it's because it hit home. The execution turned out to be okay because of his performance. It sort of saved the scripting of the scene. Those words were real that he was saying. It was very emotional. It felt so real to Noah, so truthful to him. Hopefully the scene feels like that to other people because a lot of kids are watching. You feel certain responsibility, especially with scenes like that. You can't be careless about it. Again, this particular coming out scene, I don't think it was malicious intent. Shipping is a hallmark in every fandom. There's a moment where Will mentions a crush he's harbored. He doesn't directly state it's Mike, but Mike knows. The viewer knows. How would you describe their dynamic? There's a lot of shipping that's going on with this show. In terms of all the relationships, this goes with Will's storyline. It goes with Jonathan and Nancy. For us and the writers, what's interesting is not who ends up with who. What's interesting to us is how are our characters growing as people? And most of the time, the answer to that is them finding strength within themselves as opposed to finding strength with someone else. When we were talking about Will, those are the conversations that we have. How do we get Will in a place that feels confident and strong? And that ultimately is him confronting these fears and exposing himself to everyone, including Mike. I think Will gaining strength it could have been summed up by episode 4. You didn't need to repeat that just because you wanted a coming out scene. I believe in episode 4, you could have just had him become strong enough. And later on, make the coming out scene be just an addition of his decision to come out instead of it being a threat from his abuser, which is such a heavy demand for you to put upon this character. I also, again, with the Jonathan and Nancy, I did not clock it, but some people got it like right away. This could be due to our experiences with relationships in real life. Some people will not be able to understand nuance. I understood it was nuanced. There was times I thought they were breaking up and times that I thought they were making amends. At the end, I got the impression that despite their disagreements, they still made each other better and that they were sticking together. But I am not bothered by the breakup. I am not bothered by this idea. Actually, after marinating in this idea a bit, I like this resolution. I just would have liked to understand it. I would have liked to end the scene and be able to understand what they were talking about. I would rescript it just a little bit. I liked most of it. I would maybe just make it less confusing because the unproposal thing, it also gives you the impression that it's just because they're dying that it's called unproposal, not because they're breaking up. But it's still very interesting. And it also gives Nancy such an interesting resolution and like being honest enough to say that this character needs time to figure herself out, and it being acknowledged with Nancy saying that she still doesn't know what she wants. That is such a realistic way to portray this character. I think it made her justice. And also Jonathan's. I love that they talked. They were pissing me off. I was waiting for all of them to just have a really nice conversation. For us and the writers, what's interesting is not who ends up with who. What's interesting to us is how our characters growing as people. About this part, I think I have to agree, but also I think you could have done that with certain characters. And again, you could have done that to Mike Wheeler. This is not even about Byler. I need to know what's going on inside of his head. Whatever it is, you can't tell me that his behavior is normal. He has no reaction, and I doubt this is Finn's acting. I would just like to know, what is Mike's POV? And how is Mike growing as a character? That is a huge question I have, and I would love to see it answered in the show. When we were talking about Will, those are the conversations that we have. How do we get Will in a place that feels confident and strong, and ultimately is him confronting these fears and exposing himself to everyone, including Mike? Again, just to add, I think with Will finding that strength, I think this could have been summed up with episode 4. You finish episode 4 and you reach the culmination that you wanted to reach after the coming out scene. I don't know if this makes sense. I just think there's so much in the show to be talked about that you wasted a bit of time talking about something that was already tackled or could have been assumed to be already tackled before, with Will gaining access to his powers because he remembers the time he felt good. But anyway, I'm gonna move on. When we were growing up, shipping was not a thing. This is a new thing and it gets intense. Part of me likes it because it shows how passionate people are for the show. I don't mind people interpreting things however they want. Obviously, Ross and I have what we intended. Ross touched on it thematically in episode 4 when Will finds his power, and what we were intending was not that his love for Mike gives him these powers, but his love for himself and tapping back into how he felt when he was younger. That was the key to unlocking his full potential. I also think people misinterpret that scene a lot. They say that it was Will's love for Mike who saved everything and it was really about him. The scene was always about Will and him finding power in himself. So again, I don't understand why they felt like it wasn't closure enough for Will finding himself. It seems like they have nothing to add to him, so they just keep throwing trauma and response, and the response is always this drastic, I need to find myself sort of thing. And I was just expecting something, either just show him a little bit of love or make his character less centered in love. Because if Mike's not going to reciprocate, I don't see a point in him bringing it up all the time in season 5. It's weird that you let it carry on until now and you're just repeating this cycle. It feels repetitive, it feels unnecessary to me. Again, this is my opinion. It's more of an important message to put out to younger viewers. When I'm thinking about my younger self and our struggle growing up, to put out a message that's, it'll all be right if this secret crush you have works out, versus you don't need that. Even if it disappoints some people, it's the more important message to put out into the world. The fact that they reduce Will's love for Mike as this secret crush is bothering me. It's a little bit, I don't like the wording. I don't think he's the character that has liked someone, like he has liked Mike for as long as Lucas has liked Max and Max has liked Lucas. It's long lasting. It wasn't like Steve liking Robin in season 3, having this crush. It wasn't like Dustin liking Max in season 2, having this crush. It lasted a long time, and it wasn't only something at first sight as it happened with Steve or Dustin. Reducing Robin's thing for Tammy Thompson to a crush makes sense, but reducing Will's feelings towards Mike as just a secret crush, it's really weird. He's the most loyal character to his feelings for 3 seasons straight, and while other couples have been so insecure and bumpy and have failed to show their love in a way that seems substantial or stable, that really feels like they did a disservice to queer feelings. It saddens me a bit, because why only to queer characters? Why is a pattern being set up for this? Why is a blueprint being set up that your first love, the love that feels perfect, which by the way, completely different people, completely different situations with Robin and Will. Robin had like a hallway crush, Will liked this guy for like 10 years. And not only from afar, he was his best friend, so who could know him better than Will? To reduce that first experience that feels like it makes your heart race just because it's too good to be true. It doesn't feel fair, you know? Not one crush of mine worked out. It hurts you though, right? If you feel feelings and it's unrequited, it feels like an attack on you or it makes you feel unwanted. So much of the show is 2 things. Just our love for the supernatural in the movies that we grew up on, and the other part of it is dealing with all the feelings that we had growing up. The best thing for me in the world is when younger people come up to us, the very few that recognize us, and tell us how it helped them through a difficult time in their lives. Even Robin's speech to Will, giving him the confidence to come out, and that makes it all worth it. I think it's okay to show unrequited love in your show. It's totally fine. However, it's just vile to do this to your main character for like the entirety of your show. And even worse, if at the end you give him like an epilogue boyfriend, a random epilogue boyfriend. Because as much as I think Robin's story with Vicky was okay, it was sidelined. Why can't there be a queer story that feels that is being taken seriously and has nuance, and it's not just like this quick or rushed or shown to us in like 5 minutes about how they came together in the end? Why can't it be nuanced and bumpy and so complex like every other straight story? What they failed to understand was that paying respect to queer people is just really about seeing someone queer as everyone else, like they state in the monologue, or like they try to state. And so they don't need to have this special arc. They don't need to have a coming out scene. They can just love like any other character, and they can feel themselves individually like any other character. And they might have a harder time doing that, but they can be lucky in their first love just like any other character. They don't have to necessarily face rejection first. They don't have to go through 5 stages of self-acceptance like it's a to-do list to be able to receive love. It feels very unrealistic. I think it's so easy to just write queer characters as you would write anyone else, but just acknowledge that they're queer. And I hate that it feels like a to-do list. It's the same story over and over again, and there are so many different stories from queer people. And it's like they're blueprinting the process. There's a massive culture of forecasting and dissecting. It can be overwhelming to me as a viewer because I feel like I'm not watching closely enough, but I also love seeing how people interpret things, especially with the superfans. The tiniest of details is picked up on. I think it's fun for them because they were watching this over and over again, so every little minute thing is seen as something significant, even when that wasn't our intention. Not that we don't plan things for later and do Easter eggs, but 99% of the writer's room is just talking about these characters and the story they're on. That is hopefully how you're going to be watching the show, because it can get overwhelming when you see this stuff online. But at the end of the day, we're having people engage with a long-form story, so it makes us genuinely happy. But you hit on something important, which is everybody experiences the show very differently. Sometimes I go, what show are you watching? Whatever show they're watching is a completely different show than the show we thought we wrote. Then sometimes some are on exactly our wavelength, and you see this with debates over the season. Season 3 is either the best season ever or the worst season ever. This is why you can't write to fans, because which fan are you writing to? Ross and I just try to write what we think is cool and what our writers think it's cool. This feels like a message that applies to Byler's heavily. I'm going to be very brief with my comment on this because, again, I like talking about Byler because I still think it makes sense and that it has a lot of evidence. But I will just make this comment here because it sums up, they're basically telling us that they don't think things through that much, and that the fans who have these greater theories, they sort of created that. I can accept what you're saying, but if you didn't want to be accused of queer baiting in the future and you saw that there was a large group of people who was just very hyped over the idea that you could be turning a certain way, or you could be going in this very particular direction in which would align with the values of your show, and it was very much possible, and it would hurt people if you didn't go through, you could have just acknowledged it. Like, for example, Wednesday did with Wednesday and Enid. They stated right from the beginning that there was not meant to be a lesbian relationship between the characters. But with Byler, nothing ever gets addressed. I would have been okay with them ending the discussion and saying it publicly that it wasn't supposed to be that, and that they're just friends. But they should have done that, not after Volume 2 came out, the day after when the interview was released. They should have done that in Season 4. They should have done it back then, because Byler got big. And when it gets really big and loud, you don't want to mess with people's experiences. This is a theory that is encapsulated in a sensitive topic. It would have just been nice to see it disclosed earlier before giving fans so much hope, because we've lived this story before. People have lived through ships that in the end were just queer baiting over and over again. It ended up being really hurt, and seeing an opportunity, seeing a situation set up like this in a show that is globally recognized it wouldn't have been hard to disclose it early on and avoid the turmoil that is beginning to rise now, and the disappointment and the expectation and everything else. This is pretty much all I wanted to state from this interview. The rest is correlated to other points. This video would be a never-ending story if I acknowledge the other points. So I really want to talk about what matters to me. And a big part of it is Byler. I am a Byler shipper. I think it's great that the general audience is finding my videos. It's because I've had quite a few discussions in the comment section, and discussing different points of view feels very rich to me. I can only say that it adds to my views. I had to take a break, but I'm back. So now I'll be addressing Cutgate. So apparently this is called Mission the Great Camazot's Cut, or Cutgate. I'm gonna read the way it starts out. The issue: Stranger Things Season 5 Volume 2 has evidently been tampered with. Allegedly, there have been entire plot lines and characters arcs which have been edited out, changed mid-filming for various reasons, and some of this corroborated in reasonable measure by multiple sources. A reliable source who accurately leaked multiple scenes from Stranger Things 5 Volume 1 prior to release messaged someone and another someone claiming that they had information about the cutscenes and plot lines for Volume 2. I want to stop right here to address this. We don't know who this person is. We don't know who spreaded this rumor. We don't know what their links are. This is just a supposition at this point. They're just supposing that the reason why we have some inconsistencies, it's because of the leaks. I'm not saying that it automatically discards this theory, but this is why I'm not going to be tackling everything or debunking everything in this Google Doc, simply because it's not trustworthy. It's not a reliable source, and we need to treat it as such. They claim a couple of things, like Will's arc with Vecna and Henry and how it was significantly shortened, deeper exploration of Will's sexual trauma, Mike and Will's scenes. Mike and Will were supposed to have a one-on-one scene in the basement, that relates to the WSQK. Max and Will were in a team with Al and Holly at some point. There was supposed to be a scene of Will being tortured in front of helpless loved ones, and Will was supposed to have a fake out death. These points are really good. I want to start saying that. They're really good. Especially the fake out death, I almost swore to God that it was gonna happen. And I don't mean in the finale. I thought we would have seen it, until now. I thought it might even be the cliffhanger for episode 7. But the truth is, half of the things that would make sense did not happen. They also saw that Finn and Noah filmed together, a lot of scenes, major scenes, and we haven't really seen anything. Also, the proximity between Will and Max's character, they felt like they were close, but that doesn't make any sense. The scenes that appeared in the trailer, for example, the Malevolent scene at the cabin, is not in the show. There are just some inconsistencies with this, and I think people are trying to blame something or trying to find reasons to think that maybe the Duffers were just victims of something, and that made the show or the volume weaker. I have to agree that Volume 1 did not feel this way, and the time lengths for the episodes that had leaked way before we got the official ones, the episodes were supposed to be around 2 hours long. And it seems that things have changed. From a film student point of view, when you're preparing for production time, you have to know exactly what you're going to do. You have to plan everything, because you're going to be wasting money, you're going to be wasting time, you're going to be exhausting your actors, you're going to be exhausting your crew. You just want to make sure that you're making what you need to make, that you're shooting what you need to shoot in the time that you have. So for it to just be lack of preparation, or if what I'm guessing could be a possibility, if this is true, which I don't believe it is, but if it is, it would explain a lot of plot holes. My guess would be that the Duffer brothers just got really confident and they planned everything to be longer, and they would expect Netflix to open an exception and let them publish these episodes full length according to what they had. But Netflix has these strict rules about episode length because, media engaging and stuff, and maybe they thought that because Stranger Things is an original show by Netflix and it's so impactful, it's the most impactful show, maybe they would open an exception for them, and that didn't happen, and so they took away the footage to make it shorter, and then they had to deal with all of this culmination of trying to piece everything together still. That is my guess, if it really happened, but it's still very unlikable. It's still quite unlikely. I don't think they would go as unprepared as that. They really have to make sure that everything goes according to plan. I will leave links to both of these, the article and the Google Doc below, in case you want to check it out for yourself and take your own conclusions, because it does have a lot of points. But the reason why I will only be addressing this very superficially is precisely because I don't think we can really gather much information from this. It is such a shot in the dark. It appeared at random timing. Yeah, it's a Google Doc. I mean, this is not an interview. Nobody has said anything about this. There's not much I can say. It's just what we have. However, it does make sense if that's really what happened. And one of the things that stuck out to me was the fact that the Duffers said that we were gonna have a dark Christmas, and the show was rated, it had like a higher rating, and so far we haven't seen anything gory necessarily, or that made a justification for that change or for those comments. The actors and crew previous statements about the episodes do not add up with what we currently have, such as Jamie Campbell Bower, Henry Creel Vecna, talked about having to unpack being Vecna with his therapist because of how dark the subject matter dealt with it in season 5. As it stands in volume 2, Vecna has not done any particular out of his element, especially dark and twisted like we were teased. Also, almost zero information about The Last Shadow or the appearance of Patty Newby in episode 6, as it was hinted. Noah Schnapp will Biter's general excitement about the season and his pairing with Finn Wolfhard, Mike Wheeler, and the changed demeanor in the recent press tour, claiming the coming out scene was so stressful he dissociated filming it. I felt that for all my scenes. Finn was always there. Finn Wolfhard, Mike Wheeler, he claimed he couldn't reveal a song he associates with his character since it would result in a spoiler. Not only did Mike not have any meaningful screen time, he especially did not have any monumental moments with music. He also said that Mike has the most trauma, and that would have made sense if the alleged volume had taken place. The Duffer brothers said A Dark Christmas, Matt Duffer on the finale. We finished the finale last week, or it was yanked away from us last week. I mean, we would be working on it for another year if we could. It feels very odd. Sean Levy, Finn and Noah had to carry a lot of emotional weight. Finn and Noah play a central role in the final episodes. And then there's a petition to release the Volume 2 extended cut, and you can read more in the end. And there's an evidence slideshow. I just want to say this makes a lot of sense, but again, we haven't seen the whole season, and The Dark Christmas is the one that is the weirdest because the Volume 2 came out on Christmas and we didn't see anything particularly gory, but it does throw me off a bit. My reason tells me that this is fake, or this is like, it can't be judged properly because of its lack of reliability things, and I can't go further with this because I need to hear from someone else, from the cast or from the crew that is like reliable source. So this is where I stand with it. I might need more information to give a proper judgment to this, or at least more time to process what just happened, because I read this yesterday and I'm still getting to conclusions. I haven't read the full document, and for the sake of this video, I can't do it as well. I might be saying something about this in the future, I'm not sure. This is probably my last video before the finale comes out, so I hope you enjoyed. We'll be finding out in the finale anyways, so this is just a quick checkup, I would say, with all the things that I've been asked about, and this is my take on them. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and please leave your comments below. Tell me what you thought of it. What do you think of these issues? And if you want to read the full articles, that will be in the description down below.